Hello, fictional. Welcome to the crossover What Ifs. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was trained by Celestia and got harem? Part 2. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. He didn't say anything as Spike came rushing into the library, his chest puffing with each breath he took, a panic and tired Lou easily found in his pistachio eyes as he glanced at the two of them. Spike, head upstairs. Naruto and myself can handle this, you get some rest. The Drake said nothing as he trudged up the library stairs, his eyes dangerously close to closing. It took only a few moments for the dragon to head upstairs, the small worry now gone. Check over the history of Equestrian, 1,000 years ago to precise. I'll check over here, Naruto. He grumbled as complied to Twilight's command. He honestly didn't know where to begin searching. Uchiha. He said listlessly as he looked over each book, his eyes full of boredom as eyed a book on daring do. Its cover looked particularly more interesting than the search at Hoof, but even then it was a short reprieve as he glossed over another book. Twilight groaned as she looked through the shelves, her horn flinging books left and right as she darted from shelf to shelf. Whoever took care of the library, before clearly not knowing the proper place for the books. Elements, ugh. How can I stop Nightmare Moon without the elements of harmony? Thankfully he didn't need to answer the question as Rainbow Dash came barging in, a look of defiance and readiness on her eyes. And just what are the elements of harmony? And how did you know about Nightmare Moon, huh? Are you a spy? What about you, was that some spy plan to make us drop our guard? Magenta eyes darted between the unicorns, imagining a confession erupting from the two under her gaze. Whoa, her eyes fell on Applejack as she pulled Rainbow Dash backwards, glancing at the two of them. Simmer down, Sally. They ain't no spy. Naruto here don't seem the type to hit Nopony without a reason for it. Applejack's eyes softened as he rubbed the back of his head, a small grin written across his face. But I'm sure she knows what's going on. Don't you, Twilight? Applejack's softened gaze turned towards Twilight as she nodded, her eyes taking notice of Rarity, Fluttershy and Pinkie Pie entering the library. I read all about the prediction of Nightmare Moon. Some mysterious objects called the elements of harmony are the only things that can stop her, but I don't know what they are, where to find them, I don't even know what they do. Twilight said with a huff, the 5 of the 6 ponies staring at her with concern. Didn't you just say they stopped Nightmare Moon? That sounds like a plan to me. The only stallion spoke as all but Twilight agreed to it. First we need to find the book, which we have had no luck finding so far. Naruto took another glance at the bookshelf, not finding anything of the sort. The elements of harmony. A reference guide. Pinkie Pie said as all eyes shifted to the bubbly pink mare balanced the book on her nose, showing off. How did you find that? Twilight exclaimed as Naruto mumbled a small agreement, wondering how Pinkie Pie found it so fast. It was under E. Pinkie Pie let out in a sing-song voice, Twilight letting out a silent curse, and Naruto's eyes twitched as Twilight slowly took the book. Oh. There are 6 elements of harmony, but only 5 are known. Kindness, laughter, generosity, honesty and loyalty. The 6th is a complete mystery. It is said, the last known location of the 5 elements was in the ancient castle of the Royal Pony Sisters. It is located in what is now the words caught in Twilight's throat as she took a small glimpse at the group of mares, the silence making them restless. The Everfree Forest. The word slipped out of Twilight's mouth and the tension in the air shifted from a curious tone to one of nervousness as they all knew what that meant. So when do we go? Naruto's voice cutting through the silence as he dodged a shoulder bump from Applejack. Aren't you a little too gun-ho for this, partner? You just got the crab apples knocked out of you and you're asking for another round. Applejack gleamed as she took another playful swipe at Naruto, only for the blonde to dodge again. I'm fine, that was nothing more than a love tap, Applejack. He calmly stated, missing the questioning glance Twilight was giving him. You sure? You seem a little. Rainbow Dash rubbed her muzzle as she tried to find the right word for the situation. Dodgy? Fluttershy spoke up, her voice as meek as ever. No, but close. Rainbow Dash said with a tilt of her head, the word still escaping her mind. Fake, suspicious, lying to us all. Twilight said with a snarl as her eyes locked with a sweating Naruto, unaware of the book hanging over his head. Suspicious, that's it, but those other ones are wrong, so wrong. Rainbow Dash said with a small nodder in appreciation of Twilight's help. It's because this isn't Naruto at all, is it? You're one of his stupid clones he uses to find something out. I bet he's hallway to the Everfree Forest right now, isn't he? Twilight said, her aggressive tone still evident as the book still hung in the air unknown to the clone. Would it save me if I said he's trying to? The clone never got to finish his sentence as the book came crashing down, ending its existence as Twilight's rage quelled. Mind explaining that, darling, because I believe I speak for every pony here excluding you that we are thoroughly confused. Rarity looked on as Twilight looked abashed as her muzzle opened, explaining the reason for her anger towards the clone and what exactly the mares just saw. Herc. The sound echoed through the Ponyville as Naruto slowly regained his breath as he brought himself to his hooves, the pain slightly less than excruciating. Nightmare Moon's kick did some damage and crashing through the wall, nearly knocked him unconscious right away. It was only thanks to some quick thinking and a little magic to make it seem like the kick had no more of an effect on him than one of the royal guard's blows, as a clone took his place. He wasn't entirely how specific the orders he gave the clone was. Help Twilight was a vague order, and Naruto was sure that the clone would listen, but shuffle his hooves the entire time. It was only a few minutes before the memories of the departed clone coming to him. What Twilight confided in the group as Naruto listened in was the plan to find the elements of harmony. He couldn't necessarily waste time thinking on the elements of harmony. If he bothered to think on how loyalty, kindness, honesty, generosity and laughter, he'd get nowhere but fast. He ignored the pain as he made his way to the Everfree forest. He tilted his head as the forest came into view, the tall trees visible even from this distance. It took him only a few seconds before he caught sight of Twilight and the rest of the crew that volunteered to help find the elements of harmony and defeat Nightmare Moon. Now there was only one option he could rightfully do out of the two options that were present in the unicorn's mind as he stared at the group. The first was obviously to work together and help find the elements of harmony to banish Nightmare Moon back to the moon. The second was to abandon the group and head off alone, fighting Nightmare Moon, which was a great idea, but it left a bitter taste in Naruto's mouth, going against everything he stood for. Also, he didn't think that he had it in him to trade blows with Nightmare Moon without going to more dangerous attacks. There was a small problem though with the first plan, though it didn't say how it stopped Nightmare Moon. For all Naruto knew, it put her at a standstill or sent her somewhere for 1,000 years like she said before. This didn't solve the problem, all it did was pass the buck at best, but still the first plan though still was the best plan. Slowly he approached the group in silence, wondering what the bookish mare would say as he rejoined the group. He slipped behind Rarity, her blue eyes widening as the blonde's hoof shot forward, stopping her from saying anything. The action was unnecessary as Naruto was quickly caught in a magical aura hanging upside down with a glaring Twilight meeting his line of sight. "What are you doing here?" Twilight said, her magic lifting Naruto higher into the air, each mare looking at him as comically tried to escape from the magical grasp. A few minutes of pointless fighting later, Naruto had given up with a still annoyed Twilight staring at him. "I want to help," Naruto called out as Twilight's magic faded, gravity taking over as his body hit the ground. Nobody moved to help him as groaned in pain. Perhaps helping them out wasn't the brightest idea. "You're real." Twilight's voice betrayed the look of anger she held for Naruto as he picked himself off the ground, the slight imprint of Nightmare Moon's hooves still on his chest. "I thought you would be halfway to the elements of harmony." Twilight's tone turned back to normal as Naruto rubbed his chest gently before prepping himself for another attack by the lavender mare. "Tempting thought, but when I made that clone I could barely stand, let alone go walking through the forest, so I stopped and took a small rest. As you can see, I'm as good as well, getting kicked by an alicorn demon princess can be." He waited for her to wrap him around in her magical aura, possibly making sure he couldn't follow her to save the day. The other 5 mares staring at the 2 students eyed each other. "Just stay out of the way, I'm going to stop Nightmare Moon with the elements of harmony," Twilight said as she entered the forest. Naruto blinked as he waited for the others to continue on before following the lavender mare. "So has any pony actually been in this place before?" Naruto asked as he wondered about the forest they were traversing. "Ugh, heavens no. Just look at it, it's dreadful," Rarity exclaimed, shifting her hoof to another spot so not to dirty it as they continued on. "And it ain't natural. Folks say it don't work the same as Equestria, the weather does what it wants, animals take care of themselves, and all other sorts of unnatural things happen here," Applejack said with a slight spooked tone. Naruto rolled his eyes at the explanation. "That wasn't too scary." "What's that supposed to mean?" Twilight asked with an inquisitive tone, missing the terrified look of Fluttershy behind her, and Naruto continuing on, now slightly less interested in the forest than before. "Nobody knows. You know why?" Rainbow said as she approached the 5 mares like a jaguar would stalk its prey before striking. "Rainbow, quit it." Applejack spoke up as the rest of the mares backed away, unsure of what the Spectrum Mane Pegasus was going to do. "'Cause every pony who's ever come in has never come out." Crash as she said the words, the effect was Cliff immediately gave out under them, send the group sliding down rock face as both Pegasus went to rescue each pony, saving Rarity and Pinkie Pie right away. Naruto stood still, magic sticking to the cliff as he shifted his body to adjust to the moving earth. Applejack quickly caught a root as she held onto it with her teeth. Twilight, however, wasn't as lucky. The mare slid down the cliff, about plummeting off a precarious edge, only for her hooves to be caught by Applejack and Naruto. "Pull me up, pull me up, pull me up." The words echoed through the forest as Twilight stared at Applejack the mare, digging her hooves into the ground as she held onto her with all her might. Twilight's gaze shifted to Naruto, his magic keeping him grounded as his face contorted to one of pain, his eyes closed, biting his lip as he tried to pull the mare up. It was a small shame that the unicorn didn't study to do other feats of magic, as he enveloped certain parts of his body with magic. He's really injured, why is that idiot pushing himself, he shouldn't even be here. I'm trying. The words were barely above a grunt as Naruto felt his chest tighten at each attempt to pull Twilight up. It was slowly becoming a losing battle, and he'd let go of the mare. Applejack, think of something. Twilight shouted as the country mare's eyes shifted upwards, a realization dawning on the mare. Naruto, I need you to let go. Applejack's words, as calm as can be as a grunt, erupted from the orange unicorn, which Applejack suspected would be translated to "Are you crazy, she'll die." If the hooves tightening around Twilight's hoof was any indication. Look, both of you need to trust me, I promise nothing bad will happen to Twilight, and that's the honest truth. Her words even softer than ever before as Twilight's grasp on both ponies slackened, putting her faith in Applejack's kind words. Naruto, let go, we have to trust Applejack. Twilight watched as the blue eyes opened with a small look of uncertainty met unwavering violet eyes as the two apprentices let go of each other, sending Twilight sprawling towards the ground below, only to be saved by Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy. The orange mare hopping down the cliff as she steadily declined, Twilight's eyes meeting Naruto's and a small measure of respect or gratitude filled the bookish unicorn's heart as a winged creature flew overhead, surprising each mare as it latched onto the unaware Naruto, dragging him deeper into the forest and separating him from the group of 6. Rainbow Dash paused as the words to describe her exploits caught in her throat as she just witnessed one of her friends whisked away by some flying beast in the everfree forest. We have to go after him. She shouted as Applejack and Rarity pinned the Pegasus to the ground, Twilight standing in front of her with her back turned as the sight replayed once again in her head. It seemed like sort of twisted dream, she finally felt something akin to actual respect for the unicorn as he did everything in his power to save her, even when they held nothing but a small tolerance of each other, only for him to be snatched away like that. Rainbow, stop for a mite. Applejack grunted as the Pegasus still struggled under the two mares, occasionally getting up only to be forced back down. No, he's a friend, we don't abandon any pony. Her words were a shout as the mares looked away, the small lapse of concentration eliciting an opening for the Pegasus to take off to the sky in search of Naruto, hoping to find a sign of her friend, only to be brought back down to the ground via magic. I thought I saw him, so let me go. Rainbow yelled as she struggled against the magic, her wings flapping with all its might, hoping to be free of the magical grip. Rainbow Dash, stop, Naruto will meet us there, I wouldn't be surprised if he's using whatever has him as a method of transportation as we speak. The words were slow, calm and deliberate as Twilight put as much conviction into each word she said as the Pegasus slowly resigned herself, believing in Twilight's words. Are you sure? Fluttershy spoke up in a nervous tone. The only thing actually stopping her from taking action like her longtime friend was the lack of courage and skill to keep up with the beast to rescue Naruto. You all saw how Naruto hit that beastly nightmare moon, he knocked the alicorn right off her hooves. If anything, I'm more concerned on how he's going to get to the castle than the actual beast. Rarity spoke with bravado as she put on her bravest pose. How is he going to get to the castle anyways? It was Pinkie Pie that spoke up this time, the question now lingering in the air. If we get there first, Naruto knows a spell to find me, Celestia taught us each to find other in case something ever goes wrong or we need to see one another about something, and if not, I'm positive that Naruto will be there. Twilight spoke with finality as the group slowly nodded, accepting the answer Twilight had clearly given them. So we meet him at the castle, and everything will turn out to be as sweet as Granny Smith's sweet zap apple jam. Applejack said as the group slowly rallied behind the idea, placing their faith in the plan and in Naruto as a friend. You're right, I promise everything will be fine. Twilight said, getting rid of any doubts the five withheld and reassuring herself that this was the right thing to do. It had taken far longer for the 3 mares to arrive in town than they originally expected. Short rests were made for Sunset as she was the least fit of the group. The Wanderbolt quickly agreed to it, stretching out her wings as she flew to the clouds, getting rid of any feelings of unrest before returning to the duo with an even bigger grin on her face. The musical mare also implored that they were being followed as the occasional wing beat could be heard on the wind as they traveled, only for it to be quickly dismissed by Spitfire, claiming to adjust her wings every once in a while in between their rest periods. These small things aside though, they made it to Ponyville just a lot later than they imagined. Talk about a ghost town. Spitfire's voice called out as the group of ponies settled in the middle of town, their eyes glossing over the brightly painted buildings, taking no glance at each other. So any idea what happened? Because I have no clue. Sunset said nothing as her horn let off a turquoise hue, lighting up the area around the 3. I don't see anything, but they could still be where Princess Celestia is, bask in her glory, get tongue-tied, the usual thing when ponies meet her for the first time. Mulberry eyes focused on one building, her ears noticing something that neither of her companions seemed to have noticed. If you listen closely, most of the townsfolk are whimpering to each other. I'd say that Celestia's appearance had the opposite effect. Sunset or something else might have happened. Her tone was more of an inquisitive one as the duo strained their ears trying to hear whatever Octavia was hearing. Doesn't Nightmare Moon sound familiar? The question sent a small chill down Sunset's spine. She was aware of the legend, in fact it was one of her cliff notes when she was researching on how to harness and become an element of harmony. Nightmare Moon is the princess that controlled the moon before Celestia started doing it. She turned spiteful as every pony relished in the sun and turned into some sort of crazy monster. She restrained mentioning that the princess of the sun used the elements of harmony to banish Nightmare Moon to the moon. So what's that got to do with anything? It isn't like she came back or something. Spitfire said as she glanced through her aviators, the reflective shades hiding a look of concern. I would imagine so if the ponies that are talking to taken into account. Octavia's voice quivered as she stole a glance at Sunset, hoping she'd have a look of ease, as though this was all a giant hoax. I suggest we split up and do something. I have a friend that visited town here, so I'm going to meet her, perhaps find out more about what happened in town. The mares nodding in agreement as they all waited to hear what they were going to do. Investigate the ghost town. I think I'll search for Fleetfoot, Misty Fly and Silver Lining should be around somewhere. I think I'll look for the guards after that. Spitfire said with assurance as they stared at the town hall. Sunset grunted at the straightforward plan. If she found the guards, then she imagined it wouldn't be too long before Spitfire found Princess Celestia, and doing that would most likely bring some sort of order to the town. Octavia's plan was decent as well. If she could calm her friend, then with a little luck and some convincing the mayor could quell the whole town to actually do something in case Spitfire didn't find the regal alicorn. I guess I'll find Naruto then. She ignored the small glances that the two mares directed towards her, knowing that was the best thing she could do at the moment. Helping ponies wasn't something she was good at. Knowing him, if Nightmare Moon appeared then he'd be right on her tail, if not trying to beat some sense into her. Spitfire nodded in agreement, a small grin forming on her face. And I'm sure if anything else, she has a plan to stop this. The mares said no more as they parted ways, two trying to figure out what Sunset meant by she, and the last hoping that she could help the idiot stop something she could barely imagine in her wildest dreams happening, but all of them were still unaware of the tag along following them since the train cart. Naruto's thrashed about as he was carried into the sky, his hooves connecting with scales as they desperately tried to create an opening to fall into the forest below. The creature wasn't bothered by Naruto's attempts, its tail wrapping tighter across the unicorn's chest, restricting his breathing even further than before. The beast let out a mighty screech as they passed over more trees. Naruto's thrashing had slowed at this point, magic slowly forming into the horn as it glowed with a cerulean aura. His eyes traveled upwards to find a black leather-like wing flapping at a rhythmic pace as the beast flew towards its intended destination. Four jagged hooked claws were atop of its wings as each digit flexed with every beat of his wing. Green scales adorned what parts of the body the blonde could see with a soft cream underbelly. It was easy to tell that it was a type of dragon, which one the blonde couldn't rightfully say. A snarl erupted from his captor, the tail tightening even further around Naruto as he could feel the slimy scales press against his skin, scuffing his coat as he gasped for more air. He needed to end this situation now. The blonde had an inkling of what the dragon creature wanted from him as spots began to fill his vision. His horn's aura grew brighter as he watched them pass over a large stream, a purple sea serpent of some sort, wailing about something as the water grew dangerously violent, waves crashing against one another. What could have been a decent escape route now seemed almost as dangerous as the creature carrying him to almost certain doom. Naruto waited until they cleared the stream before letting his magic take form. The monster's tail grip slackened as the hue died off and the threat of being attacked by its prey now non-existent. The lapse of observation was one that the beast would soon regret. The bolt of magic shot upwards, ripping into the dragon-like creature's leather wing. The now damaged wing ripped further as it fumbled, letting go the blonde as it tried to regain a semblance of flight as it flapped itself to a standstill, slowly losing ground as the rip furthermore, drops of blood now falling to the ground. Naruto's position was slightly better as clones came to life after the bolt of magic, the clones popping one by one as he hopped from one to another to land on the ground, his body protesting the entire way. It was a matter of seconds and 4 clones before he hit the ground, and as soon as all 4 hooves hit he took to running. Naruto didn't need to waste time fighting with the creature desperately trying to right itself in the air, yet. It wasn't until he was atop a bridge that he slowed his pace, a castle easily visible on the other side. He made it to the castle of the two sisters. Now all he had to do was wait for the rest to arrive and finish what essentially started the battle with Nightmare Moon. The ground erupted with a thud as the bridge shook dangerously as it hung so low, almost dipping into the eerie mist below. Blonde was sure that he would have dropped if not for the coating of magic that surrounded his hooves. The rocking slowly stopped as Naruto turned around, his eyes falling on the beast that had held him captive not just moments ago. Its head was that of a dragon, two beady black eyes staring so intently at him, whether in silent rage or something more akin to wariness the blonde wouldn't know. What he did know was that it was a worm. A lesser dragon that posed only a little threat because of the injured state he was in. He had no doubt that he could defeat the beast and look through the castle for the elements of harmony. Alright, not the smartest place to fight, but come on you stupid bucking worm. The words held no effect other than to psyche himself up as the beast let out a war cry of its own, its claws grasping onto each plank of the bridge in a dangerous charge at the blonde. Its nails tearing parts of each plank off as it continued at the blonde stallion, its prey now within reach as it let off a vicious swipe, only to hit air as the blonde balanced himself on the ropes that kept the bridge hanging, his hooves coated with the familiar magic that made him stick to the cliff he was stolen from moments ago. He wasted no time in delivering his own blow as his hoof connected with its scaly hide. The blow was a glancing one as the worm jerked his head back, letting out another dangerous swipe as the blonde quickly ducked under the bridge. The magic holding tightly to it as gravity pulled on him, and the briefest of glimpses past the mist caught his eyes. A rocky traverse THT meant certain death if he was to fall below. The pain now ever present in his chest as the battle had reached a small break for the time being. He quickly adjusted himself as the bridge started rocking once again, the worm above him, rocking the bridge dangerously as they delayed the dangerous fight. The worm's eyes desperately searching for his prey, unaware of the stallion slowly making his way to the opposite side of the bridge, and the stallion unaware of the change the wyvern itself was going through. As silent as a ninja, Naruto made his way to the end of the bridge, standing on level ground, the worm now blocking the route to enter the ruined castle. Its wing lifted into the air as a crackle of energy shot off from Naruto's horn, ripping through the third talon. A shriek came from his opponent as blood spurted from where its missing appendage used to be. Its head snapping at Naruto as it mouthed, a bullet of fire erupting from its mouth in rage, the shot going wide as it scorched a tree. "You're not supposed to do that." The words probably meant nothing to the worm, its tongue now hanging loosely above its dagger-like teeth, but it was resolute in Naruto's mind. Perhaps there was a lot more to the ever-free forest than he originally thought. It was the second that Naruto's eyes left the beast that he felt something wrong. His opponent nowhere to be found, his eyes ventured to the sky, hopeful to find his missing enemy in the sky, making a desperate lunge at him. Naruto's wished he was right as he felt the monster's acrid breath on him. The heat of his mouth bristled Naruto's fur as a ball of fireball erupted into his chest. Naruto gasped for breath as he rolled on the ground again. His quick thinking has saved him from being killed by the ghastly creature. What the hell, this thing was a raving lunatic just moments before we started fighting. What changed now? The thought was now ever present in his mind as he rolled away from the injured claw, impaling the ground where he once was. Another bolt erupted from Naruto's horn, severing the claw and a part of its wing, now hanging limply as it screeched in horror. He said nothing as he inched his way back onto the bridge, putting distance between the two of them. Another ball of fire passed him, slamming into the rocky wall, the flames disappearing into the crevice below. He ignored the shriek of rage as the worm roared at him, a volley of fireballs coming past him, missing the bridge and effectively missing him as he was an eighth of the way from leaving the bridge and being one step closer to entering the castle now. A sickening crack caught his attention, his head snapping to attention as the beast charged at him once again, its wing hanging limply, pulling its body being pulled forward by the strength of his left wing alone. It had a drive that was for sure. Naruto slowly clicked his tongue. The thought of continuing his journey was once again pressed out of his mind when the worm barreled into him, his limp wing cutting one of the flimsy ropes that now held the bridge. It now rocked with a dangerous sway than before. He bit his lip as the pain jolted through his body. The time for holding back had long ended. If this worm wanted to fight to the death, then he'd reluctantly oblige now. Its remaining claw slung down on Naruto, figuring that the blonde's barrier would only deter it the slightest. The sound of bones breaking echoed through the two fighters, the worm shrieking in pain, thrashing about, its talons now broken. Naruto quickly got up the blonde's eyes, holding the slightest of killing intent as he felt the bridge gave way. The bridge's last rope now cut thanks to his opponent. The effect was imminent as the bridge fell. Naruto channeled magic to his hooves. It swung into the cliff face as the effect sent jolts through his bones. The worm wasn't as rather unfortunate. The lesser dragon, now subject to gravity, was impaled by the jagged rocks below. A sick squelch rang through the blonde's ears as the worm gave out a painful shriek. Even Naruto felt a small tinge of pain as it croaked out its wails, a weird blue mist erupting from its mouth with each wail it made. He took one last look at the worm before continuing his journey to the top of the cliff. It wasn't long before reaching the top, the castle of the two sisters now unapproachable, unless he dared to venture down into the rocky crevice below, and he didn't dare to in his condition. He took one last glance at the wailing worm. It was barely noticeable thanks to the shifting mist, and so with a quick act of mercy, a bolt shot through his horn, impaling the creature as it slumped over dead. This wasn't the first creature he killed, but it never got easier, and it was something that was going to haunt his dreams later on, or so he thought as exhaustion settled in, and something seeped into the few scratches he had from the altercation. The battle now over and the pain he ignored kicked in as he dropped to the ground facing another trial that he hadn't faced in 3 long years. The flash petered out any darkness as an amber mare righted herself through the quiet forest, quickly adjusting to the odd terrain she was in, her cold cyan eyes traipsed over the area. It was a cliff that had recently collapsed, if she was to hazard a guess at the rather fresh-looking dirt shifted under hoof. Her eyes flashed with a subtle turquoise hue as she took another long look at the scene before her. Her muzzle slowly shifting from a look of thought to of concern as wisps of magic clung to the ground, disappeared under the unicorn's watchful stare. I should have gone with him. She mused aloud. Sunset's tone was a somber accepting one as her horn lit up, once again in search of her best friend. Her horn hummed with magical energy as multiple signatures flooded the unicorn's mind, riddling her thoughts, as she slowly distinguished the signatures disregarding the unfamiliar ones and honing on the familiar ones. A grimace of satisfaction slowly formed on Sunset's face as she located a group of ponies, 7 to be specific, not but a mile or 2 away from the mare, barely skirting the distance that she could sense anything magical. There was one thing she couldn't pinpoint though as the signature erupted in her mind, the signature she felt almost made her knees buckle at the sheer magnitude of magical energy wafting off the power. It didn't take a genius to figure out who owned the amount of magic, it was the one everyone was wanting to defeat Nightmare Moon. In a small thought of humility she was grateful that this was the extent of her skill, with this particular spell went as far as it did, because if this was the scope of Nightmare Moon's power, she was partly glad that she wasn't here for her rival. Sunset quickly turned her attention back to the group of ponies, they had yet to move since she honed in on them, a somewhat unsettling scenario, but it could be quickly remedied with her assistance she was sure of it, and that was good enough for the mare. So with a flash of turquoise she was gone and the forest remained as a figure came running out of the bushes, a look of anger on her face as the gem she bought to protect her from prying magical eyes, now useless as she couldn't keep up with her target. I'm so going back to base, that idiot can deal with this himself. Cerulean eyes opened to a familiar sight as he picked himself off the ground, daylight petered down on his body as he assessed the situation with each second he did the more he lost himself to the familiarity, the sight, the smell even the air held a sense of purpose as Naruto righted himself. This place should have filled bright blue with a joy unknown to the blonde ever before, brought unease that settled in his hooves as ponies passed him by. This isn't right. The words meant little to the scenery as the ponies continued about their day, ignoring the outburst as if he didn't exist. His face slowly formed to a grimace as his eyes shifted to his left, a quaint little wooden stand stood out as fond memories of the place slowly centered itself in the blonde's head. It was his favorite place to eat at Ichiraku Ramen, and the sight alone brought tears to his eyes. His hooves moved forward as the blonde lost himself down memory lane, the faint aroma of broth simmering to entice customers to spend their well-deserved cash in the small establishment, a hearty laugh from Tucci, and a scolding tone erupted from 1am Ichiraku. He didn't even register duking his head behind the curtain flaps as Naruto looked on amazed in some horrid fascination that his home had changed so much and yet so little. Welcome to Ichiraku's Ramen, what can I get for you, Naruto? The question was innocent enough as a Pegasus looked at him with big doe-like brown eyes, her wings holding a pad and paper as Naruto stuttered out a serving of 3 bowls of ramen. She gave a curt smile before disappearing behind the counter, obviously ordering getting his meal. Naruto didn't know if it was a wave of nostalgia that hit him or he had actually died and this was his own personal heaven, but for the moment he didn't mind the horrid mashup of his 2 separate lives. I'm telling you I saw him come in here, Kakashi-sensei. A familiar voice called as Naruto froze in place, a scarlet earth pony with bubblegum pink hair erupted through the flaps, green eyes peering down at Naruto as a small smile graced her lips before she shouted to the rest of the crew. DCH, leave it to Sunset to leave you for a second and lose you, and I thought she was the competent one between the 2 of you. Sakura's voice was one of teasing as she watched Naruto silently nod, whether she would acknowledge the tears dripping from his cheeks he wouldn't know, but he couldn't forget this. It's not my fault that he can't control his appetite, besides it's my understanding that you left us to go swoon over Sasuke. An irritable unicorn griped as she walked through the flaps, the scowl of judgment as Naruto called it quickly replaced with a much softer visage as the unicorn took a seat next to Naruto. The usual for me, but a small we're on a bit of a schedule. Naruto shuddered as he stared into the cyan that turned to him, Sunset's eyes slowly shifted red for the briefest of seconds as an uneasy feeling of trust and something more bubbled in his chest as she leaned closer and whispered into his ear. Naruto, what do you want to do? The words were almost lost on him as another voice brought the unicorn to tears. I'd expected you to be here, but I wish you would become a tad more unpredictable as you are in battle, Naruto, otherwise well you know what ninjas do. A kobold Pegasus walked in with gravity-defying silver hair, a headband covering his left eye called out. A mask covering his muzzle as he smiled with his eye before taking a seat next to Sakura. Naruto still tried to hold back the wails that bottled in his throat as he stared at Kakashi Hatake, or better known to him as Kakashi-sensei. I guess we'll make this the team meeting spot since your food is already here. Naruto blinked as his tears slowly let out a drip falling into the broth of ramen below his muzzle, unsure of when the meal got there. It wasn't long into his first bowl of ramen that another familiar voice echoed through the ramen stand. I disagree, a meeting of this importance should be held somewhere with subtlety. Octavia's voice rang out, the mare walking in with a slow gait. She stopped to stare at the group of gathering ponies, her eyes snapping forward as the slowest tint of red overtook the mulberry in her eyes. After all, even the most historic of things that happen need a plan, don't they, and a weapon too. The cellist's voice grew deeper as she stared at the Pegasus slowly making his next bowl. Even acting out on something that you believe in will change things. The words cut through the stand like a hot knife through butter. The patrons grew silent as Octavia's eyes returned to normal. The diet ramen please. Those words alone made Naruto finish his bowl of ramen. Picking up the mares I see, well don't stop on my account, please go on. A large gray unicorn bellowed out as he held notepad in the air, making motions for the stallion to go on. Naruto choked back the tears getting ready to yell at the perverted stallion. His white mane as spiky as ever as streaks of red dropped across his muzzle, a lecherous grin was all but ever present on his mentor's face. But I guess I'm rubbing off on you already, before you know it, you'll be a bona fide mare magnet, like yours truly. The words did nothing more than strike a chord of content with Naruto as he slowly returned his gaze to the counter and the next bowl of ramen laid out before him. He just stared at the bowl, debating the feeling of ill content he felt as he stayed here longer. Slowly he rose from his chair, all eyes directed towards him, as another patron's wing slammed his face into the I hope he doesn't become like you. I mean, it's hard enough to get some time to hang out with him alone, but if he becomes popular, well, there goes any spare time he has. The wily Pegasus grinned as her wing lifted up, giving the blonde a small reprieve of air as the broth covered his coat, only for his face to be slammed into the countertop, roughly the shards of ceramic cutting his cheeks as he watched a sinister-looking version of Spitfire stand before him, her eyes full of a malice he'd seen before. I thought you were strong, you didn't need my help before, what's changed, Naruto? The patrons slowly rose to their hooves, giving Spitfire a death stare as her wing rose from Naruto's head, her muzzle now adorned with a sheepish grin. Sorry about that, my wing slipped, but seriously we do need to talk about this mission. The wave of content now washing over Naruto as he resigned himself from attacking the Pegasus. What mission? Naruto asked with a tone of curiosity. PCH, of course the blonde forgets the mission. A dark navy blue Pegasus scoffed as he entered the establishment, his cold onyx eyes holding a look of intent as Naruto's head nearly snapped off at how fast he turned to see the owner of the voice. The effect was immediate as Sasuke gave Naruto a familiar grin, not suspecting for his ally to actually attack him, the blonde tackling him to the ground as his horn glowed with a dangerous gleam, wiping the smirk off Sasuke's face. What are you doing, dope? He choked out as the patrons got up, all now ready to stop Naruto if need be. Why, damn it, why did you go to him? The words were cold as Naruto glared at Sasuke, his eyes shifting to the group as the Sharingan replaced his onyx-colored eyes. Answer me or I swear to Celestia I'll end you. The words frothed from Naruto's mouth as the Uchiha began to pale under his powerful grip. He won't tell you the truth. Another voice called out, this one unfamiliar to the blonde. His eyes still on Sasuke as a shadow loomed over him, and with a ripple of energy poofs of blue smoky mist clouded his vision, he held on to Sasuke tightly still as the blonde's eyes narrowed, a blast of magic crashing into Sasuke's head, effectively ending his life. More blue mist poured out, this time from Sasuke's dead body, before the mist swirled and dissipated, leaving a confused Naruto glaring at the crumbling ground. What's going on? He called out, unsure of what was real or some misguided dream. I think it's time we catch up, kid, it's been 3 years. Naruto's eyes slowly traveled upwards as the familiar side of the damp sower came into view, and there lazily looking at him the terror of Konoha and most powerful Biju of all, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto took in the sower, it hadn't changed since he visited it so long ago, various pipes going every which way as the occasional drip of water landed into the murky water he was standing in. The sower was dimly lit, only faint pockets of light reached the ground, most focusing in on him. This was all an attempt to distract himself from the only thing that had changed in since the last time he'd been here, the bars to the cage that held the Kyuubi was missing, and that was a big problem. His cerulean eyes glimpsed into the fox's former cage, only the soft glow of crimson illuminated the cage, giving Naruto a very large outline of his former prisoner. Naruto felt a pit of uneasiness settle in his stomach once again as a large red paw erupted from the doorway. He felt the wind ripple as it barely missed his body before slowly retracting into the dark cage. Naruto Uzumaki. The words were deep as the fox's muzzle poked through the cage, a sinister smile forming on his face, as each early white tooth he had was nearly as big as him. Large red eyes beamed down at him, a look of amusement slowly forming on his face as the rest of his head poked through. Large ears adorned the fox's head that gave him a small comical look as his head bent down staring at Naruto. It seems I'm free. The words alone sent a chill down on his spine as Naruto tried to think of something to appease the beast. Nothing came to mind, and any bravado he could muster disappeared in an instant as its putrid breath fell onto him. Saliva slowly felt its way into the back of Naruto's throat. Meeting the QB put him on edge, but talking to him free was something that he didn't know what to truly do. The quake erupted through the Sower as the fox snarled in irritation, the act making the Sower react even further. As loose stones fell to the ground, the kitsune retreated back into the former cage, and in an instant the tremors stopped. What was that? It was the only thing he could get out of his mouth, and even then it felt his throat tighten even further as QB let out a small huff. That was your mind trying to comprehend that I'm free, kid. The words became quieter as the fox's words rang out. The vibrant crimson aura grew fainter and fainter as Naruto stared at it, nodding and understanding what he was just told. Calm down or you'll never wake up. Another voice called out to him. He couldn't place his hoof on it, but a sense of familiarity washed over him as the owner seemed to approach him if the sloshing water was anything to go by. I don't understand what you're trying to tell me. The word slipped from his mouth as a snicker erupted from the cage. Any doubts of there being just two of him was cleared from his mind, as knew he wasn't alone with just the fox. Stop being stupid and listen for once, kid. The fox's voice was a deep grumble as the fading crimson returned full force, smothering the Sower. Alright, Naruto realized something he said was off. It sounded like he wanted him to live. I said calm down, if you don't you're not going to wake up. A softer voice called out as the water seemingly evaporated under his hooves. I'm not your enemy, here. The words hung in the air as a pony walked out of the QB's cage. It was a mare that much he could tell just from looking at her face. Her coat of vibrant pink that only slightly dimmer than Sakura's bubblegum-like hair. It was matted and looked horrible, like it hadn't been washed or treated in years. Her mane was worse. Deep cinnamon red hair were stained with patches of gunk that covered what could have been a beautiful mane. Even more prominent was the mare's eyes. Crimson eyes gleamed with something akin to concern and humor. The pony held a small smirk as it walked forward. Her tail was by no means in better condition than her mane. There wasn't anything really stand out about the rest of the mare until his eyes met her cutie mark. It was of the nine-tailed fox, and somehow it didn't threaten him as much as being in the presence of the actual fox. It almost made it seem comical. Who are you? His voice did little to hide the curiosity that he had for the mare. My name is Kurama. I'm what you'd call an avatar for the QB, so you don't collapse your mind and we can talk to each other as equals. Her voice was warm as a gentle breeze rippled past her. But that isn't why I'm here. I need to talk to you about the QB. She couldn't help but snicker as Naruto braced himself for a fight, the action going unnoticed by the giant fox either. What about the fox? His voice was tense as he put pressure on the back of his hooves, ready to slam into the mare at a moment's notice. Being in the fox's presence was almost unbearable, but she was different. Naruto knew for a fact he could beat her if push came to shove. You two are connected by the seal the Yondaime placed on you originally. She watched as he gave her a small nod, understanding what she was telling him, but refusing to give up his stance. We all know what happened. You died and were set here, but what you didn't know was that the fox came with you. Harem barely resisted the urge to slap the taste out of Naruto's mouth as he rolled his eyes at her. Didn't he have the slightest idea of what she'd do to him, stubborn brat? Sadly the seal didn't apply here since you technically died, so as brief as I can put it, the QB, while free of the cage, isn't able to roam around in the outside world without dying rather quickly. Then why hasn't it done anything? 3 years is enough time to think of something. Naruto's voice was a shout as the crimson aura in the dark cage flickered. Because it's been recuperating. Well, you were originally flesh and blood with a chakra circulatory system. The QB wasn't. Its body was entirely composed of chakra. So the transition from chakra to magic has been quite painful. The words lingered as Naruto's stance relaxed. It was a small relief as the two stared at each other. So he's stuck here, able to look at old memories and do nothing more than look at memories and hope for some more entertainment. What's that got to do with me? The words were rather cold for Naruto as he looked at Kurama. The smirk seemed to grow on the mare's face. He wants to make a deal, Naruto. Since the QB can't essentially live outside of your body, and we're both sure you're going to find yourself fighting more enemies like this one, and that will require some more magic. So if you allow the QB to experience what you experience, which is essentially taste, touch, sight, hearing and smell, it'll give you its magic in return, almost similar to your previous deal with him. I don't see why I should. Naruto rubbed the back of his head with his hoof. He didn't really see any reason to help the fox out, especially since he knew firsthand of what the fox could do with that energy. To protect those precious to you, I mean you still do that right? Kurama's eyes flickered with amusement as Naruto shifted a little. Just think on it, and if you do decide to agree to our deal, just say these two words out loud. I accept. Naruto said nothing as he slowly faded away, his cerulean eyes locked on Kurama's crimson eyes as they stared each other down until Naruto disappeared entirely. I think that went rather well, don't you? Kurama's voice chimed as two more figures walked forward, their eyes glaring daggers at her. I'm sure he'll accept now, all we have to do is wait. Cerulean eyes blinked in confusion as cyan eyes stared back filled with relief and a small amount of anger. Do you know how bucking worried about you I was? I thought you were dead when I first saw you. Sunset's voice was a barely restrained shout as she looked away, hiding any evidence of her concern. I'm fine, in fact I feel better than ever. Naruto exclaimed as every mare eyed him warily, despite the statement seemingly being false. He did feel great, like he never had been kicked by Nightmare Moon or fought that freaky worm in the first place. What did surprise him however was the quick punch to the chest from Twilight and Applejack. What was that for? He rubbed his chest as he shook off the blow. Just seein' if you were lying to us, but I'm a guessin' that little nap did more than any medicine could do. Applejack said as she raised her Stetson, her green eyes filled with mirth. You could barely hold on to me while I was dangling from a cliff, so yes, hitting you is the best way to see if you're injured or not. Twilight led off with a groan as her eyes flickered back to the castle. They had wasted a good hour waiting on him to wake up, by force mind you. While Twilight was grateful for what Naruto had done for her a while ago, she would rather have gone to the castle of the two sisters and settled the whole eternal night problem than watch over an unconscious blonde. Going forward was not an option at all though with Sunset and the other mares, even with some insistence on saving Equestria that got some of her acquaintances to side with her. Sunset made a casual remark about how easy it would be to scatter their ashes to the wind if they ditched her. Nobody dared touching the rickety bridge after that. Well, thanks for the vote of confidence. He eyed the group as they returned a smile to him, apparently things were looking up for the blonde. I think we should get going though, if we're going to be defeating Nightmare Moon. You heard the stallion, let's move out. Twilight said as she was the first to go across the rickety bridge. She had been waiting for the perfect chance to head towards the castle without angering a certain unicorn, but apparently with Naruto giving the go-ahead that was all she needed to head on. Rainbow Dash flew right beside her, the Pegasus's eyes traveled backwards wary of Sunset and her obvious threat against them, so to help put Rainbow at ease, and partially herself, she took a glance backwards as Sunset and Naruto walked side by side, the blonde talking adamantly about something, probably how he escaped his captor and tricked it into thinking he was long gone. Applejack, Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy and Rarity took a much slower pace as the bridge rocked on occasion, but it wasn't too long before every one of them was standing in front of the ruined castle. I imagined this place to be more regal. Rarity said as they all looked on at the front door, a chunk of what each presumed a higher portion of the wall to be leaning against the ground as moss and vines grew around it. It is 1,000 years old and who knows how long it's been abandoned. Twilight said with a slight odd tone, and Naruto couldn't really blame her either. There was something about this castle that was awe-inspiring, perhaps it was the elements of harmony residing inside the building, or perhaps because this is where it all began. He didn't know what to say, but somehow he knew for some reason that they all should be here as if moths drawn to the flame. We should be careful when we get inside, Sunset said as 7 sets of eyes settled on her. I'm serious, it's pretty obvious that she's in the area or already here, so don't split up unless we have to. The mares still stared at her as she watched Naruto nudge open the door by himself. What? That's the nicest thing I've heard you say since you joined up with us. Rainbow Dash let out with a huff as the mares nodded in agreement, Fluttershy a little more hesitantly than the rest. So far since Sunset had joined up with them they'd been called idiots and various other names she didn't care to mention, watched a sea serpent nearly boiled to death, only stopped thanks to Rarity, and all of them had been threatened to be incinerated on more than one occasion by the mare. In fact, the Spectrum-maned Pegasus wasn't entirely sure why Naruto hung around with such a sourpuss. In fact, she still wasn't sure. Doors open. Naruto said with a huff as the blonde shook his head at the glare that Sunset was giving the group. Why couldn't his friends get along as he wished them to? Twilight was the first to enter the building, followed by the rest of her group, Sunset staying behind as she glanced at the ground coldly. They aren't too bad once you get used to Twilight. He chided as a small smile graced her lips. It was these times alone that Naruto saw the true Sunset and was glad he spent those many months to gain her friendship. Naruto, she's here, Nightmare Moon's in this building. Her words held only the slightest bit of caution, his hoof placed gently on her shoulder, her head raised to meet a warm smile full of the confidence. Then it's good thing we don't have to look for her, because I want to finish what I started. Naruto grinned as the words erupted from his mouth. The first round he had with Nightmare Moon went in her favor because he dropped his guard, thinking she would go down with one hit. This time he wasn't going to make the same mistake this time. So you're not scared at all? Sunset wasn't going to admit having the smallest of fears facing off against the alicorn. If things went her way tonight, she could be an actual element of harmony by tonight. I was at first, but something came up and made this seem a little less scary than before. He stated with ease as Sunset accepted the answer, it probably pertaining to the fight to the death earlier. I know we can do this, Sunset. I don't think anything could stop us if Twilight, yourself and I work together. It was something Celestia wanted to see, and it was kind of funny that it was something to this magnitude for them to work only for their mentor to miss it. Naruto and Sunset, come in here, you have to see this. Twilight shouted as the two rushed in one after the other, their eyes following a nearly empty room, Mother Nature growing wildly in one corner, where the moon shined brightly on. What was alarming though was the pedestal before them. It was something that neither had seen before, but at the same time knew that on each of things branching out form, it was an element of harmony. See, we found it, we honestly found it, now we can save Equestria and put everything back to normal. Twilight's words echoed through the room as each mare that had been previously observing the weird object take an element and place it on the ground in front of Twilight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Twilight, there's only 5 here. Pinkie Pie voiced a concern as each pony looked at each other, wondering what to do. So what now, if you don't mind me asking? Fluttershy spoke up as every pony turned towards Twilight as she studied the objects with interest, ignoring the world around her. The book says that once all 5 elements are present, a spark will cause the last element to appear. The words were said more to assure herself that this was the correct course of action than to satisfy every pony's curiosity. Well, what in the hay is that supposed to mean? Applejack grumbled as Naruto and Sunset passed them by, their eyes on the elements in question. I don't know, but I have an idea. That idea was the same one as Naruto had as they both readied themselves to envelop the elements of harmony with their magic. Come on y'all, I think it's best if we leave Twilight with the princess's other students and let them figure out how these here elements work. Applejack said as the voice of reason. 2 Celestia's students surprised the orb slowly raised and spun, rapidly forming a small twister that the 3 of them quickly dove unless they lose the keys to their victory, leaving the mares alone to dwell on what happened to their friend in Sunset. They said nothing as they all landed on their hooves, each staring across the room as Nightmare Moon stood before them, the elements of harmony right beneath her. The sight sent chills down the 3 spines as her cat-like eyes focused on them. A sneer formed on her face as her wispy hair shot towards them, only the quick thinking of Sunset saved them as they vanished in the blink of the eye, all 3 of them appearing farther away from the malevolent alicorn. Nightmare Moon's eyes fell on Sunset, particularly her cutie mark as the mare in question shook off the blotches of color that threatened her vision. I thought it not possible for a unicorn to attain a mark of the sun, no matter, you 3 will die here. Her horn shot forth a beam of magic, hoping to impale one of the 3 as they stood in a group. Another flash of light illuminated the room, and Naruto's hoof came crashing down on the alicorn. Naruto said nothing as he let loose another hoof, dealing blow after blow on a prone Nightmare Moon. His back hooves smashing into her teeth as he tried to make her skull one with the floor. He let out a sigh of relief as he felt Twilight's magic throw him off the alicorn as a beam of magic shot forward, piercing the roof above the spot he was once standing. Naruto could only crack his neck as he made a gesture for the 2 of them to find the elements while he took care of the mare of the moon, which they didn't pay no heed to, instead focusing on helping Naruto incapacitate kill Nightmare Moon. It was disheartening that she rose with only the slightest bit of blood dripping from her mouth, only for his efforts to have some merit as she opened her mouth, revealing the damage that Naruto had just done to the mare's teeth. Nearly all the visible ones at first glance were broken and would be in need of repair if she were to defeat them tonight. Nightmare Moon couldn't believe the audacity of these unicorns, first the blonde for hitting not only once but so many times afterwards, the mare with the sun mark for her quick thinking, and the purple from stopping her from ending the fight with the blonde. You're going to die a pointless death, and when I'm finished with you, I shall bring you back to life just to make you watch as I tear your very word apart. Her eyes shifted towards Naruto as the room illuminated again, and a searing pain that she could only comprehend as being set on fire, as her tail quickly extinguished the righteous pain, only to have her tail quickly detached from her body. Wow, Sparkle, I didn't think you had it in you. Sunset said with surprise as she marveled at the severed tail on the floor and the atrocious burn wound that now decorated their enemy's flank. The mare in question slowly moved to a different spot so they wouldn't be stuck together in case she decided to something of a more powerful attack to defeat one of them. Her eyes settles on Naruto as a beam shot from his horn towards Nightmare Moon, the mare aptly dodging it, only to find another hitting her chest plate, cracking it under the pressure of his attack and sending her into the air hovering above them all. Enough games. Naruto froze as waves of black magic erupted from Nightmare Moon. It dripped off of her making a sickening squelch as it hit the ground, slowly inching towards each unicorn. He backed away as he slowly made his up a wall, trying not to find out whatever would happen if he was caught in this magic's grasp. He could only grit his teeth as Twilight was enveloped within it, the defensive spells her brother taught doing no good as the black magic slid under the dome and pulled her down into the murky abyss. Sunset fared only slightly better as she sent wave after wave of fireballs, evaporating the weird magic as quick as it came after her, only exhaustion and the relentlessness of the magic finally defeating her. He felt his hoof grow cold as he backed further away, missing the lack muck that surrounded him, and quickly pulled him down to a murky abyss. Nightmare Moon cackled as the three fell into the abyss of her dream magic. The blonde might have trumped the vision of what his heart desired most, but she'd use his nightmares against him and the rest of his motley crew. Her wings let out another victorious flap, she drew upon her dark magic as the three figures were pulled out of the black abyss, their bodies now unconscious as she dropped before the one that caused her the most problems. Her horn glowed brightly as she stabbed down into Naruto's chest, the horn not even breaking his skin, as her cat-like eyes widened at the implication. The insufferable stallion grinned as a bolt of magic slammed into her forehead, with her sending a bolt of her own magic into his chest, as it both of them flying backwards into the wall, creating a spiderweb-like crack in it, freeing Twilight and Sunset from their own nightmarish dreams. Naruto said nothing as he picked himself off the ground, he could hear his ribs break at the impact of the blast, and not to mention the damage his back was feeling from impacting the wall, so roughly, the blonde was grateful that she did rather unprepared, so it was barely did as much damage as it could have done. "You give up yet?" He choked out as he felt the coppery taste of blood fill his mouth, a droplet or two dripped from his mouth as he walked towards his friends. The look of shell shock quickly wore off from Twilight and Sunset as one let off a torrent of flames enveloping Nightmare Moon and the other inched her way towards the elements. Naruto met Twilight as they stared at the stone objects, both letting whatever magic they could conjure seep into the 5 stones, only for a backlash of magic to hit them and a charred Nightmare Moon holding a beaten Sunset with her mane by her throat. Her hooves let off a mighty shockwave, destroying any hope of ending the fight at the very moment. Sunset let loose one more torrent of flame, freeing herself only to feel Nightmare Moon's hoof crash into her body, sending her flying into a recovering Naruto and Twilight. "Does that answer your question?" Her sneer slowly fell from her face as she watched all 3 of her opponents pick themselves off the ground. At first this was amusing, then it got infuriating. "Now I'm wondering if you even know what you're trying to do. Do you think you could possibly beat me with your only chance of victory now lying in shambles?" She pursed her lips as she waited for them to rise. She wanted to see the despair of Celestia's 3 as she killed them, but not before answering the question she asked. "What we're trying to do is beat your funking flank, and I seriously can't wait to see you burn," Sunset said as she leaned against Naruto's left side, blood dripping freely from her mouth as her horn lit up and the area became hotter around Nightmare Moon. "I don't know if we can, but if these 2 idiots think it's possible, well, who am I to argue against the ruling majority?" Twilight said with one eye closed, leaning against Naruto's right side, her breathing labored as she lit up her horn, the air becoming unstable around the alicorn as she looked at all 3 of them. "But you don't care about that, right? You want to know why we won't give up, don't you?" His words were barely tangible as he spit the blood and bile forming in the back of his throat. "It's because all 3 of us knows what's at stake and I can't let these 2 my friends die here, nor any of my other friends across Equestria, that's why I won't lose here." Naruto shifted as he felt the magic envelop his horn, sending the fastest and largest bolt he could rocketing towards Nightmare Moon, not noticing the glimmer of magic that erupted from the broken elements. The second her magical hair intervened to deflect the blow, a massive explosion erupted through the room, sending all 3 spiraling backwards and blowing the door out of the Celestia forsaken room off its hinges, cracking every wall and sending some the roof crashing into the floor. The smoke poured out the room as Naruto laid on top of Sunset. Moving wasn't an option at this point as he eyed the smoking crater of where Nightmare Moon once stood. "Did we get her?" He wished he could ask the question aloud as Twilight got to her hooves, remarkably the least damaged of the 3. She stared into the crater, her left eye still closed as she focused for whatever came their way, and as the smoke dissipated a sight that nobody could fathom stood before the 3 of them. Nightmare Moon was standing before them uninjured, it just wasn't possible they hit her with so much less, and that did more damage to her than when they put everything they had into one last attack. "Oh, the looks on your faces are just priceless, you thought that gambit would work, didn't you? I mean, if you did that before I started taking you all seriously, I'm sure it would have rightly killed me, but I learned a valuable trick from you Orange One to harden my body, and it worked perfectly. So now I believe it's time we close the curtain on this little charade of a fight." She took one step forward only to have a bolt of magic erupt from Twilight's horn, stopping her from advancing. "Don't worry, Twilight, we're coming." Various voices shouted as the sound of hooves clacking against stone erupted through the room. "I get it now, I understand it," Twilight said with a gasp as memories of the night's activities played out through her mind and the realization of how the elements were supposed to work came to the front of her mind. "You think you can destroy the elements of harmony just like that? Well, you're wrong, because the spirits of the elements of harmony are right here. She nearly shouted as the fragments of the elements of harmony reacted to Twilight's shout. Nightmare Moon backed away, not believing what she was seeing. She'd ensured everything would turn out perfectly for her. One by one the mares entered the room as Twilight talked about the elements and what each pony represented. You still don't have the sixth element. The spark didn't work. Nightmare Moon exclaimed as she glanced at the six standing before her. It couldn't be possible, this wasn't fair. But it did. A different kind of spark. I felt it the very moment I realized how happy I was to hear you all, to see you all, how much I cared about you all. The spark ignited inside me when I realized that you all are my friends. You see, Nightmare Moon, when those elements are ignited by the spark that resides in the heart of us all, it creates the sixth element. The element of magic. Twilight exclaimed as a crown formed on top of her head, and with that the element sent a blast of rainbow magic the two spectators couldn't believe. It coated the Alican with its magic as it twisted around her body, eliciting shouts of all kinds from the mare. Naruto could only stare at the magic for so long as his eyes dipped down to the ground, realization setting in as he watched six broken shards bounce off the rumbling ground. Oh no. It was all he could think as the magic died down, the six mares slumping to the ground unconscious, as Sunset and Naruto witnessed a being step forth from the crater. Its body a jet black as wisps rolled off its legs evaporating into the night sky, menacing red eyes gleamed with malice as it stepped forward crushing a rock underneath its hoof with a crunch. Naruto noticed another body behind it, an alicorn passed out and looking heavily beat up from the way things looked, almost as if all the damage they did transferred to her. The fight wouldn't end at this point, and so with everything he could muster, Naruto stood up glaring at the monstrosity before him. Oh, it's good to be back in my old body. The figure said, as it turned towards Naruto, its head tilting as a look of amazement washed over the creature's face. You truly are an amazing unicorn to still have enough strength to stand up after everything I've done to you tonight. I would imagine a lesser pony would have died from the beginning. Naruto said nothing as he swayed as he took a step forward, his eyes bearing down on his opponent as he desperately pulled from his reserves of magic, trying not to rely on the fox within him. What, you honestly think you can defeat me? Oh, the trouble you're in for. Naruto said nothing as every pony began to stir, opening eyes transfixed on the shambling Naruto approaching the wisp-like enemy. He lifted his hoof to slam into the target only for his body to pass through him, sending him crashing into the ground, their hope for a victory now gone as they all watched Naruto hopelessly try to get up, Sunset replaying everything in her head. Oh, you fell, well since you're in no rush to get up let me help you to your feet. The creature grinned as it beeped its front left leg back and kicked him into the air, Naruto's eyes bulging at the sheer force of the blow, sending him crashing into the defeated alicorn. It turned its back on Naruto, knowing that its job was done. I'm not done, cough yet. The words echoed through the room as its head craned to see Naruto still shifting to get up, a hopeless attempt in his opponent's eyes, but humorous nonetheless. SunsetxOctaviaxSpitfirex cough Celestia, Twilight and so many cough others. I'm not going to stop until I beat you, not until I know they're safe. Naruto choked out as the two stared at each other for another second before the wisp came charging at him intent on ending his life, and just as the blow struck Naruto felt a wave of energy fill his body as the wisp fell backwards clutching its stump of a hoof. He felt magic like he couldn't believe and it literally feel it erupting off his body in a dull orange light. Its cries were dulled out by the ring of flame that circled around it, cutting off any chance at escape as Naruto stood before it. An orange aura clung to his body as his eyes remained a cerulean blue, and then the aura just vanished, seemingly absorbed into a small ball of magic, no larger than a marble at the tip of his horn. It swirled ominously as Naruto approached the creature. It tried backing away, only to find magic blocking its way at every step of the way. It knew it should have killed that blasted sunmare first, instead letting its frustrations taken out on his enemy. Its eyes turned towards Naruto one last time as the orb planted itself in the middle of its chest, ripping apart any defense that it tried to attempt. Create the vision of Naruto standing before him with a crown atop of his head was the last thing it saw as its body was exploded from the attack. Nopony said nothing as Naruto looked around, blissfully unaware or not caring at all that an element of harmony was on prominent display for each mare to see. Naruto blinked as he looked around. He could barely bring himself to stay standing, let alone continue. Know that the energy was gone. I'm going to sleep. His words echoed through the chamber as he passed out, the crown not falling far from him. The outcome to what was probably the most important battle in 1,000 years turned in Equestria's favor as the force of good prevailed over the malevolent entity that possessed Princess Luna and purified the benevolent princess in a battle to end all battles. This was the truth that Celestia spread throughout her lands as those that knew the truth kept quiet about what actually happened. It was a very hard day when she had to attend the summer sun celebration, when all of the true heroes were bedridden or asleep. She quelled a fear of their heroic citizens not returning, with a quick lie of how they needed the smallest of checkups after such heroic acts. The crowd ate it up like she would devour a slice of cake. In other words, there was not a single doubt among them all. On that subject, she was brought to tears at the sight of the battle once she was arrived, her 3 prized students laying on the ground covered in grievous wounds that any pony lesser in their situation would die from. Her sister, to her surprise, was unconscious and covered in all sort of burns. Her teeth were gnarled as they looked as though they'd been kicked in repeatedly, and her tail was but a stub that barely covered her most modest of areas. She held only sorrow for not being the one to bear this burden. She quickly took each to Canterlot's hospital, hoping that despite her inactiveness to handle this matter, that they'd hold a fraction of respect for her compared to the respect she held for them. It had been a week since that fateful battle, and nearly every pony involved in the matter had recovered. Twilight's friends were easily let go from the hospital, as Celestia promised them that she'd summon them when their friend awoke, which she did not a few hours later, but was still bedridden for multiple reasons. Celestia had a long lengthy conversation with the 6 of them, commending them on stopping her sister, which they graciously took and casually disregarded, before getting to the subject at hand. They all voiced their concerns for Naruto and Sunset, mostly Naruto, but any conversations leading to him were reassured that he was fine, and that he was just sleeping off the few injuries he actually had. He wasn't, but they didn't need to know that. Their curiosity and their lengthy conversation over the 5 quickly left, leaving Twilight with a decision to make, and Celestia with a slightly larger problem on her hooves. That of her sister was starting to stir. Luna was the next one to wake up, 3 days later mind you, and that was a very long time to recover from their injuries, and while things went progressively well with Twilight, things didn't go too well with Luna. Celestia honestly believed that was because a unicorn had her mouth propped open and her horn near the mangled teeth of her beloved sister. Thankfully she was fully restrained, but it did little to reassure her younger sister as the unicorn's horn grew closer to her mouth. The process was difficult for the unicorn as she returned the alicorn's teeth back to its original state, which was a thankful miracle with all things considered. Celestia made haste to return to her sister's side, curious to what her thoughts on everything that transpired. The restraints were undone upon her arrival. They stared deeply at each other when she entered the room. Celestia was pleasantly surprised when Luna broke down in tears, uttering apology after apology. It took hours before their peaceful resolution ended, and any doubt of her sister's loyalty being in question erased from her mind as Luna took to her hooves, accepting whatever punishment came her way, which entirely depended on her 2 students. The next to wake up was Sunset Shimmer. She was unconscious for 4.5 days, which was 4 too many to the stubborn unicorn. Celestia could recall the sight of the mare biting into the nearest doctor and slamming her hooves into the nearest nurse that tried to stop her from leaving the room. Even her own arrival did nothing to sate the mare's fury as she insisted on finding Naruto. Her eyes brimmed with hatred as the orderlies pinned her down, blood coating her teeth as her injuries finally began to set in. An anesthetic had finally put her down as she promised to burn the hospital down if she didn't see Naruto. She had it bad for him. This was something the alicorn knew, so she supposed that she couldn't fault her for that. She adhered to the request. It wasn't even a matter, to be honest. Naruto was still unconscious and would remain so until he woke up, and he would, she was sure of that. Celestia tried to stir up conversations with Sunset on the daily happenings of the hospital. Most were met with witty retorts that were about as harmful as a gentle breeze, others actually funny, including the one about the Pegasus that left a present for them, a coin by the looks of it. Conversations about Nightmare Moon brought a look of sorrow to the mare's eyes. The alicorn would hazard to guess the injury sustained in such a brutal battle weighed heavily on her mind. She confided in Sunset, as she did too with Twilight and the others, and she would do for Naruto when he awoke. The enemy that they fought that night was her sister. Celestia expected a look of shock or surprise from the mare, only to find that ever-present knowing look, like she figured out the answer a while back. It wasn't until the 7th day that all fears were erased from Sunset and herself. Cerulean eyes opened, and perhaps the second most important conversation she had with Naruto would begin. Cerulean eyes blinked in confusion as the tiled white ceiling swarmed his vision. The smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils, and the occasional beat of a heart monitor gave him the unsatisfactory answer that he was in a hospital. He slowly rose from his uncomfortable pillow, finding the sight of Celestia smiling in front of him, a pile of gifts that H presumed was for him, and a relieved and tired-looking Sunset to his left. It was slightly odd though that a purple alicorn looked at him with a look of shame and what could possibly be fear. So we won, right? Naruto bit his jaw, wondering the thought. He remembered defeating whatever that thing was and passing out, but he wasn't sure if something else happened. Yes, we won, idiot. Sheesh, nothing else happened, but Celestia showed up after you blew that thing to Tartarus and back, but on the bad side you missed a week. Sunset said with huff as she seemingly ignored the mysterious alicorn. Oh, stop with the glare, it wasn't intimidating when I yelled at Celestia before and it's even less intimidating now. The alicorn huffed, turning away muttering to herself. So who's she? Naruto asked, trying to change the subject. I'm glad you asked, Naruto, this my sister Princess Luna. Celestia could only smirk as Naruto's face shifted to various versions, it was a bit humorous. She was also Nightmare Moon, before Twilight separated her from that creature. The reaction wasn't surprising as Naruto visibly stiffened at the mention of Nightmare Moon. She was grateful at the show of restraint Naruto held as he stared at her sister, anger now evident in his eyes. I'm sorry. Luna's voice was quiet as the alicorn stepped forward, her eyes trained on the ground as she moved closer to Naruto, ready to accept anything he deemed worthy as punishment for her. "'Twas not my intention for this altercation to go as far as it did, that bewitching wisp might have been influencing my actions, but your injuries are still my own doing." She raised her gaze, meeting Naruto's eyes, expecting seething hatred and possibly his hoof coming crashing down on her face. It's fine, water under the bridge, Naruto grinned as he watched Luna's eyes water, tears threatening to slip down her face. She hugged the recovering alicorn, fighting back the tears that threatened to come. He turned his attention toward Sunset as she had a look of contemplation looking at each of him. Celestia, however, was smiling at the display, but something was off with the smile, like she had a secret she was waiting to reveal to him just at the right time. "You're not telling me everything, are you?" The words came out lighter than expected, despite the heavy implications behind it, and as the smile faded from Celestia's face, a wave of unease fell on Naruto as Luna pulled away the alicorn, returning to her sister with bloodshot eyes. "They're correct, I wish you weren't bedridden as you were, but if I delayed this conversation, I honestly don't know what the repercussions might be, and if this past week has taught me anything, it's that hesitance will only bring disaster to our land." Celestia's tone was darker than usual as her horn lit up, a flash of yellow magic spread throughout the room as 6 objects hovered before him. "Do you know what this is, Naruto?" Naruto stared blankly at the objects that hovered in the air, a sense of familiarity washed over him as he looked at the purple, green, blue, red and yellow shards of crystal. These were the remaining fragments of the element of harmony. The odd thing was the golden crown in front of him. It had his cutie mark as the headpiece, but it was an orange crystal swirl instead of the red one he had on his flank. "I know those are pieces of the elements of harmony, but I have no idea what the crown is for. Are you making me a prince or something?" He paled at the thought. His life in Canterlot was partially stuffy as it is, and if he became a prince, he didn't want to imagine the things he would have to do to get a moment's freedom. "That's the element of magic, Naruto, or at least I believe half of it." Celestia watched as Naruto blinked, and then a few more times for good measure. It would be seconds before he erupted. "Wait, what?" Naruto exclaimed as he shook his head back and forth, not accepting the likely scenario taking place right now. "I believe you had me the first time, Naruto. This is your element of harmony, and as I said before, I believe that this is the element of magic." Celestia's voice was controlled and collected, that demanded him to at least hear out before disclaiming her theory outright. "I know you're implying that I'm the element of magic, but Sunset and I can vouch that we saw Twilight blast Luna with the rainbow magic and separated the two of them. She figured out the elements of harmony, not me, so go take the crown to her." Naruto eyed Celestia. The princess smiled and shook her head as she dropped the crown on his hospital bed. "She figured out the elements of harmony, that is true, but I believe she wasn't the only that tried to find the spark. Sunset, Luna and Twilight herself, recall you using magic alongside her to try and activate the elements before they were shattered." Celestia watched as Luna looked away, rubbing the back of her head sheepishly at what her elder sister just mentioned. "I believe that they reacted to both magical influences before their destruction, and in very different ways." Twilight herself felt a pride in finding friends that would stand beside her, and with that she genuinely opened up and accepted friendship. "I want to say that this is the likely reason that Luna and the Frightmare were disconnected, all because she was more inclined to accept friendship." Celestia finished as Sunset looked away, finding the response feasible, but still not compelling enough to agree with, and apparently Naruto too, if the look on his face was anything to go by. "That still doesn't explain why he's an element of harmony. All you basically said was that the new friendships that Twilight made spared Luna from being put back on the moon," Sunset said with poetical tone as each set of eyes turned towards her. Celestia turned her gaze back towards Naruto, finding him still wary of this conversation. "Exactly, so Naruto, what did you feel when you stared down that Frightmare?" Celestia asked as the gazes returned to Naruto, each curious about his answer. Celestia had a pretty good guess at what it was. Naruto blinked, thinking on the subject, the battle played before him, his mistakes, the things that he could have done, what he should have done and what he inevitably did do. There was one thought present in his mind as they traded blows: he needed to protect everyone. Nightmare Moon was going to harm a lot of his friends, ponies that he considered family, and so many ponies that did nothing wrong to deserve a life of eternal darkness, no matter how long it may be. I wanted to protect every pony, not just Sunset, Twilight and every pony else at the castle. Every pony. I made so many friends already, and it seems like a waste to lose them all because one alicorn had a bone to pick with the world for not enjoying the night. Luna looked away at the sincerity of the statement, the words stung with truth. Sisha smiled, her ears perking at the sincerity of his statement as he stopped looking right at her. That's why I believe it chose you, Naruto. The difference between you and Twilight regarding the elements of harmony wasn't accepting something that every living thing should have, nor was it a life-altering change of views and accepting others into your life. No, I personally believe that you knew about how precious friendship was from the beginning, and instead it reacted to your will to preserve those bonds you created, especially when you were going as far as putting your life on the line, when it mattered the most to preserve those bonds. Celestia finished as Naruto slowly started to accept the role as an element of harmony. However, you are just one element, and there are 5 mares unaccounted for, so please take these fragments with you until you find the remaining elements. Celestia said as she plucked the crown from the bed, leaving Naruto the 5 broken fragments. Naruto could only shake his head, grabbing the largest shard he could find. It's 4 princes, 4 mares I have to find. Naruto said as he pulled himself from the bed, his 3 hooves touching the ground as he walked on wobbly legs toward Sunset's bed, the task more difficult with carrying the item in his hoof. The mare shifted from a pensive stare to a surprised look as he placed the red crystal firmly in her hooves. The reaction to whether it was Sunset's loyalty or Naruto's conviction was instantaneous. It glowed for the slightest of the seconds before wrapping a necklace formed around her neck with a red sun as the centerpiece. I mean, if Sunset wasn't my element of loyalty, I wouldn't know who could be. Naruto said nothing as tears streamed down his closest friend's face, not believing it was possible. The click of her necklace being detached was the only motion that Celestia, the miraculous feat that happened in a dingy hospital room, and without saying a word she left, her sister following closely behind her. Was you that said that the elements bearers chosen through harrowing deals or gargantuan feats, dear sister? Luna's voice a whisper as Celestia stopped to look at her, a knowing smirk written across her face. I believe Sunset had already accomplished both of those, don't you? Her words were soft as the underlying message was plain as day. She fought you alongside him, and that's not counting the few adventures that she drug him to do with her before your arrival. If Sunset wasn't Naruto's element of loyalty, the only other element I could find even remotely close to the mare's nature would be kindness. You jest. Luna's royal voice boomed through the hospital as orderlies, patients, nurses and a few doctors stared at her in confusion, eliciting a sheepish look from her, before quickly turning into a scowl directed at Celestia. We enjoyed jolly quips and pranks of the jovial kind. This, however, isn't something to be humorous about. That mare has the tongue of a viper and twice the venom. I see no justification of her being such an element. The scowl continued as Luna finished. If Celestia was fazed by it, she was hiding it rather well. Luna, my dear sister, I know Sunset so well, it was as if she were a daughter to me. The mare is, as you said, as sharp-tongued as they come, but beneath that cold prickly exterior is a mare with a heart of gold, which only shows for the slightest of moments. I should know after all, I helped come this far after all. Celestia continues onward, exiting the hospital as ponies gave Luna and herself courteous bows, and with a quick nod and wave of her hoof, they all continued on their day. Luna, I may not know what the future holds for Equestria, but I do know a thing or two about my students, and can tell you this, that even though I didn't foresee Naruto becoming a bear, but I knew that regardless of what happened that those 2 ponies would be together until the end of their days. Celestia gave one last glance at Luna as she winked at her before teleporting away, back to the castle, and to hide away Naruto's elements and give her sister some time to contemplate what he said. 2.5 days later. Naruto tried his hardest to keep a grin from forming on his face, soaking in what he called freedom from his imprisonment stay in the hospital. He stretched his hooves, letting his joints crack at the simple freedom to do whatever he felt like, causing his saddlebag shifting uncomfortably against his sides. The contents rattled back and forth. Some doctors and one nurse by the name of Tenderheart insisted on him staying to fully recover, but once he could sprint through the hospital without doubling over in pain, that was all the incentive he needed to leave the abominable place. It was admittedly hard leaving Sunset alone there in the dingy place alone, but the mare insisted on having a little time alone. It was weird she had gotten quieter after finding out she was an element. Maybe this was a big deal after all. His eyes glanced upwards at the night sky. It seemed more vibrant than before, like it had come alive. Naruto was willing to wager that it was because Luna was actually looking over the night once again. Celestia, while great and no doubt powerful, could only do so much, and watching over the constant night was probably something the mare could keep control over, but it was best left in the hands of the mare, who had originally done it so long ago, if not under a watchful eye. He walked with a slow gait, mindlessly avoiding the crowds as he headed towards Canterlot Castle. The ivory walls shined brighter than before with the luminescent moonlight pouring down it, illuminating any of the previous hiding places Pegasi of the Night Watch. He gave them a curt wave, which was returned with a scowl or dismissal of it, which practically meant to get to bed, we're working diligently to protect your sorry flank. Which he did, albeit with a quicker pace, he hadn't slept in his bed in what felt like forever. His hooves clacked against the ground as he galloped through the hallway, not so gracefully dodging the occasional night watch unicorn that glared at him as he passed him by. His hooves finally slowed down as the familiar sight of orange coming into sight. The door to his room was one of the noticeable doors in the area, it was an orange painted door that contrasted with the pristine white walls that surrounded it, with the occasional gold trim close to the ground. Naruto unlocked the door and let it swing open with a satisfying silence, his Spartan-like room full with gifts that he really had no idea to do with, partially grateful that he had a clone bring all this stuff here earlier. He glanced at the card saying thanks or wishing him to get well soon, a rather large wicker basket of apples set nicely on his chair, obviously from the apple family or perhaps just Applejack, he wasn't entirely sure at the moment. This alongside a well-made blue scarf probably made by Rarity, and a book titled Practical Magic for the Magically Impaired. Which he imagined was from Twilight and possibly Spike. The more frugal gifts were a Jack-in-the-Box form Pinkie Pie, an autographed photo of Rainbow Dash, a cup from Fluttershy, he knew this because of the assortment of birds on it. Other gifts felt alongside a few picture frames from Octavia for which he was grateful for, a set of aviators form Spitfire, and a haul of junk that he had no interest in from other adoring ponies, which made him wonder how he was going to get rid of half of this stuff without offending any pony in general. His eyes traipsed over the gifts, finding something else that he overlooked, a strange pendant. It was triangular in shape with what seemed like an alicorn, with its wings outstretched and its head stuck in a defiant pose on top of it, or the upper half of one at least. Naruto had no idea what it was made of it, but what he could tell was that there was something missing from it, a large diamond-like shaped hole in the center of it, there was a much smaller hole where its eye was, but it seemed insignificant to the item. Naruto glanced at the object for a few moments longer before placing it in his saddlebag that contained the pieces of the elements of harmony. He'd look at it or show some pony tomorrow, right now that wonderful and expensive Cloudsdale Cloudbed was calling his name. He made on more pass with his magic, a clone appearing from nowhere with an all-too-familiar scowl on his face. Just watch them, those things are important after all. His words were tired but forceful as the clone looked towards the saddlebag complying to its creator's command. It wasn't long after Naruto's head hit the fluffy and shiny goodness of his bed and falling off to dreamland. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys, let me know in the comments section how was the story and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, bye bye.